Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
From AI-inspired insights from farmers.
If you're enjoying what we're doing here, we'd love to hear from you too.
Absolutely.
Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and definitely leave a comment telling us what you want to see more of on this deep dive.
We're always looking for new ideas, and we really value your feedback.
So what farm-related mysteries are you dying to uncover?
Right.
What questions are keeping you up at night? Let us know, and maybe we'll tackle them in a future deep dive. Today,
Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. If you're new to farming or even thinking about getting started, there's a pretty big change happening right now that I think you'll find really interesting. It's all about getting super precise with weed control, and there's some exciting new tech making it possible.
yeah, that's spot on. The old ways of dealing with weeds, whether it's spraying chemicals everywhere or spending hours and hours weeding by hand, those are being challenged in a big way by things like artificial intelligence and laser technology. And what's really fascinating is that this isn't just stuff you read about in sci-fi books. It's actually happening on farms right now, and the results are pretty amazing.
Totally. We've been digging into some articles about AI-powered robots that zap weeds, these laser systems that are incredibly accurate, and this whole trend towards what they call precision agriculture. And what we really want to get into today is how do these technologies actually work? What kind of impact are they having in the real world? And most importantly, what could this mean for someone like you who wants to farm efficiently and maybe even more sustainably? Let's start with this laser weeding thing, because it seems like that's all about being super precise.
Yeah, you're right. Laser weeding is becoming a real game changer because of how precise it is. One of the best examples we found in our research is this thing called the laser weeder from a company called Carbon Robotics. It's not just a laser sweeping across a field. There's a lot more going on under the hood.
Okay, so can we break down what makes it so precise? What's actually happening?
So first off, the system uses computer vision, kind of like how our eyes work, to actually see the plants in the field. But then, and this is where it gets really cool, it uses AI deep learning to tell the difference between the crops you want to keep and the weeds you want to get rid of. Think of it like teaching a kid to spot different kinds of plants by showing them thousands of pictures. The more the AI sees, the better it gets at knowing which is which. And then all that info gets fed to a robotic system that moves the laser around. And it can target the weeds with sub-millimeter accuracy, hitting the meristem, which is basically the weed's growth point.
Wow, sub-millimeter accuracy and hitting the growth point, that's wild. I remember one of the articles saying that these lasers can kill up to 100,000 weeds per hour. That could really change how much time and effort you need to spend weeding, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it could drastically cut down on the need for people to weed by hand, which, as anyone who's ever weeded knows, is a huge time saver. And there's another big advantage, too. No more spray drift. With traditional herbicides, even if you're careful, some of that stuff can drift off target. But with lasers, it's like a super focused beam, only hitting what you want.
Right, and there's even something beneficial about how the weeds are actually removed, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, you're talking about the vaporization thing, right?
Yeah.
The weeds basically get zapped into nothing, and then whatever is left just decomposes and adds organic matter back to the soil. It's like almost a closed loop. And our research showed that they've successfully used this tech on all sorts of crops, like potatoes, onions, garlic, stuff people eat all the time. And they've been doing it in places like California, Washington, Idaho.
Yeah.
So, it's not just some experiment, it's the real deal.
That's cool. And it looks like Carbon Robotics has a whole range of options for different size farms too, right?
Yeah, they've got this Laser Weeder G2 product line. So they have different sizes, starting with the G2 which is kind of their smaller, more portable unit, perfect if you're starting out or have a smaller operation. And then they go all the way up to the G2 1800, which is this massive 60-foot machine. That one's designed to cover a lot of ground, especially for things like organic corn and soybeans. It seems like they're really trying to make this technology work for everyone.
So it sounds like lasers are one really powerful tool in this whole new way of doing things. But our research also highlighted another pretty big breakthrough: AI-powered sprayers. It's like a different approach to the same problem.
Yeah, exactly. Lasers are all about, zapping weeds with energy, while AI-powered sprayers are super precise with the herbicide. They use AI and cameras to figure out exactly where the weeds are, and then they spray only those plants, leaving the good crops completely untouched.
And I remember reading in a Bloomberg report that this could reduce herbicide use by up to 90%. That's huge, especially if you're trying to minimize your environmental impact.
It really is a game changer. And, a lot of big companies are working on this. John Deere, for example, they've got this See and Spray Ultimate Sprayer that's got 36 cameras scanning the plants constantly. The AI software it uses is processing like 2 million pixels every second, and it's got this database of over 300,000 images to help it tell the difference between, say, a corn plant and a weed. It's crazy. They've got it working with corn, soybeans, and cotton right now, at least in the U.S., and it's only going to get better.
Wow, that's a crazy amount of data for the AI to learn from. It's almost like it's building a visual encyclopedia of all the different weeds a farmer might have to deal with.
You got it. And John Deere's not the only one doing this either. Bosch, BASF, Smart Farming, Green Eye Technology, those are just a couple other companies that are developing these AI-powered sprayers.
Yeah.
So it's like this whole new wave of technology coming in.
And it's not just about the sprayers themselves, right? I remember that NC State Extension publication we looked at. It had this really cool breakdown of what makes a robotic weeder tick. There's a lot more to it than just spotting the weeds.
Exactly. They broke it down into 4 main parts. The first is observation, which is all about the AI and the cameras like we've been talking about. Then there's action, which is basically how does the robot deal with the weeds once it sees them? It could be mechanical, like chopping them up, or thermal, like lasers, or chemical with the spraying, or even electrical. Then you've got guidance, which is how the robot moves around on its own, navigating the field without a driver. And finally, there's mapping, where it uses GPS and its vision to create maps of where the weeds are.
Yeah, that mapping stuff seems super useful for managing a farm in the long run. I bet you could learn a lot about how weeds spread over time and maybe even get ahead of them.
Totally. It's all about using data to make smarter decisions. And the NC State Extension, they highlighted this research showing that these robotic weeders could reduce herbicide use by, get this, 20 times compared to conventional methods, and in some cases, even up to 95%. They even mentioned this company, Verdant Robotics. They've got this robot called the Sharpshooter. It uses targeted herbicide application, and they claim it reduces inputs by 96% and weeding costs by more than half.
Wow, that's impressive. It's not just about using less herbicide, it can actually save you money, too. The article also mentioned robotic weeders that actually pull weeds out of the ground. It's like a high-tech version of what people have been doing for centuries.
Yeah, they're called vision-guided cultivation machines. So like there's the Robovator and the Stecati IC. They've been using those for lettuce in California to cut down on labor. And then there's Garford Farm Machinery. They've got the RoboCrop, which is another one. It's pretty cool to see how they're using these advanced vision systems to do something that's so fundamental to farming. And let's not forget about drones. There are companies like Precision AI that are using drones with AI to fly over fields and target weeds from above.
Wow, it really feels like this is a whole new era for weed control. But what's the real-world impact of all this? How is this AI and laser stuff actually changing things?
Well, one of the biggest potential impacts is on the herbicide industry. I mean, we're talking about a huge market worth around $37 billion. And if these technologies become widely adopted, it's definitely going to shake things up. But even more importantly, we need to think about the environment, especially for those who are passionate about sustainable farming.
You're right, and the environmental concerns with traditional herbicides are pretty well known, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. Like there are concerns about soil health, about harm to pollinators, about water quality, and then you've got the whole issue of herbicide-resistant weeds, which ironically can lead to needing even more chemicals. It's a vicious cycle.
And let's not forget about the potential benefits for people, both the farmers themselves and the people who eat the food. Reducing exposure to those chemicals they talk about, like glyphosate and paraquat and atrazine. Those are some serious concerns. That was something that really stood out in that Guardian article.
Exactly. And beyond the environmental and health aspects, there's also a strong economic case to be made here. We saw numbers suggesting that laser weeders could cut weeding costs by as much as 80%. A big part of that is because you don't need as much manual labor or herbicides. I mean, the NC State Extension mentioned that weeding by hand can take over 40 hours per acre and cost up to $1,000. And then you compare that to these laser weeders that can potentially pay for themselves within a few years. That's a pretty strong argument for someone starting a new farm, right?
It's wild to think about how much time and money you could save. And it's not just the herbicides and labor. These smaller robots can actually be better for the soil too, can't they?
Absolutely. They're lighter and more compact, so they don't compact the soil as much as those big, heavy tractors.
Hmm.
That's good for soil structure and overall soil health in the long run. It's like they're designed to be gentler on the land.
And it's so cool to see that these technologies are actually being used by real farmers. Our research even included some firsthand accounts from people using this stuff.
Yeah, like there was this guy, a co-owner at Hungenberg Produce Co. He was saying that he saved a ton on labor costs since he started using a laser weeder. And then on the Carbon Robotics website, there are all these testimonials from farmers talking about how cost-effective and reliable the lasers have been. It's great to see those real-world success stories.
It's really encouraging. But it's also worth pointing out that not everyone agrees that this is the only way forward. I mean, in that Guardian article, they mentioned some people who are skeptical and think that regenerative agriculture might be a better approach, or at least something to do alongside this new technology.
Oh yeah, for sure. There are definitely folks who believe that building healthy soil and creating a more balanced ecosystem through practices like crop rotation and cover cropping, that's the real key to weed management. And, it might reduce the need for these high-tech interventions, whether it's chemicals or robots. It's probably going to be different for every farm. But, in the end, it might be a combination of these new technologies and good ecological practices that works best.
So, looking ahead, what do you think? What's the future of AI and laser weed control? What trends are you seeing?
Well, all signs point to robotic weeders becoming even more sophisticated.
Huh?
Like that NC State Extension publication, they're predicting that we'll see even more advanced sensors and AI systems within the next decade.
That makes sense. I mean, as the AI gets smarter and the sensors get better, these robots are only going to get better at finding and killing weeds.
Right. And there's a ton of work being done on expanding the AI's plant identification database. They're even using synthetic images, like computer-generated pictures, to train the AI, which is pretty cool. That's going to help the robots recognize even more types of weeds at different stages of growth and in all sorts of different conditions.
And another thing I've noticed is this move towards smaller, more affordable robotic weeders.
Yeah, that's huge, especially for smaller farms or anyone just starting out. Not everyone can afford a giant laser blasting robot, right? And there's even talk of using renewable energy, like solar power, to run these things. That NC State Extension mentioned it, and so did companies like Agan Robotics in that Guardian article. It just makes sense, right? Using sustainable technology to create more sustainable farming.
And it seems like a lot of people are betting on this technology too.
Yeah. There's a ton of investment pouring into these robotic weeding companies, from venture capitalists, private investors, even the big agrochemical companies are getting in on the action. That tells me that a lot of smart people believe this is the future of farming.
One last thing that jumped out at me is this whole idea of using data analytics with these robots.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Imagine being able to combine all the data that these robots are collecting with other information about your farm. It's like having a super detailed picture of what's going on in your fields, so you can make smarter decisions about how to manage those pesky weeds, especially the ones that are resistant to herbicides.
It's pretty incredible to see how much AI and lasers are changing the way we think about weed control. And for all of you out there who are new to farming or thinking about getting into it, we wanted to give you a little bonus insight, kind of like a cheat sheet for joining the Weedkiller Revolution.
So if you're just getting started, don't feel like you have to jump in and buy a massive laser weeder right away. Maybe start smaller. Like maybe try using a laser for your most valuable crops. Or in those problem areas where weeds are always popping up, it's a good way to get your feet wet without breaking the bank.
Makes sense. You don't have to go all in right from the start. And I bet there are some smaller, more portable options out there too, right?
Yeah, definitely worth doing some research and seeing what's available. And another option, especially if you're still getting things set up, is to hire a robotic weeding service. It's kind of like try before you buy, and it lets you see the benefits without having to make a huge investment.
And even though the upfront costs might seem high, it's important to think about the long game, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you can reduce your reliance on herbicides and cut back on labor costs, you'll save money in the long run. It's like an investment in the future of your farm.
And for new farmers, especially, promoting the environmental benefits could be a real selling point, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. If you can say that you're using less chemicals, that's a huge plus for a lot of people who are concerned about the environment and where their food comes from. It's a way to stand out in a crowded market.
Okay, so if someone wants to learn more about this, where should they go? What would you recommend?
Just stay curious. Read those industry publications, check out agricultural technology websites, keep up with the latest developments in lasers and AI. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to make decisions about what works for your farm. And, Think of it as more than just weed control. It's a chance to be part of something bigger, a movement towards more sustainable and precise agriculture. It's pretty exciting to think about where all this is headed.
Absolutely. So, to wrap things up, the main takeaway from our deep dive today is this. AI and laser technology are transforming weed control. And whether you're a seasoned farmer or just getting started, this stuff has the potential to make farming more precise, more affordable, and better for the environment.
Yeah, and as you're planning your farm, think about how these technologies could fit into your vision, even if it's just in a small way at first. The world of agriculture is changing fast, and these tools are at the forefront of that change. It's a pretty amazing time to be a farmer, honestly.
I love that perspective. And with that, we'll leave you with a final thought. As this technology becomes more accessible, how might it change not only how we control weeds, but how we think about growing crops and taking care of the land for future generations of farmers? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Hitting that like button and smash that subscribe.